Hi Club Scrap card makers, I'm Trisha Morris coming to you with the Pacific Northwest card kit tutorial. We're gonna have a lot of fun making these cards. I've been so excited about filming this. I'm finally getting around to doing this the day before this kit ships, so the clock is ticking. Let's get this done. I've got my trimmer, my accordion pocket filer ready to go. If you're new around here and aren't familiar with the accordion pocket file, please reach out so we can help you get your hands on this kit and a video tutorial to help you make one for yourself. It really makes a big difference when you're creating the card sets. And then we have in this collection some really beautiful ribbons. We'll set those aside for finishing. Some super cool washi tape that I adore. I think I just could not be any more perfect. Then we also have these adorable craft printed feather tags, some awesome little leafy charms, and then some compass charms that have 2 end loops on each of them. Those are fun to apply to the cards. I think we're using them in set C today. And finally, we have this beautiful paper collection. So the first thing that I typically do is sort the paper in the order we'll be trimming it. So let's get right on that. We'll find some pine plain. So there's a lot of different greens in here. The pine obviously is the deepest, darkest shade of green that we have. And then we're gonna look for the moss, which is kind of more of a medium green. It is definitely a very mossy green. Next, let's look for the sea blue. Now the sea blue is closer to almost like a teal. It's like has a really pronounced texture to it. So make sure you grab that one. And then one of the white plain. So again, make sure it's white on both sides. Then look for another pine plain. So that's that deep, deep green. Then one sky. Now you'll know the sky by its just light shade, and it actually looks like it has puffy clouds printed right in the middle of this piece. It's so pretty. And then 2 prints. So just take both of those feather prints. I'm putting them face down on my pile. Then we'll find another sky, another sea blue, and we'll wrap things up with the remaining pieces, the white and the moss. Also, we'll need to trim our cut aparts, so we'll place this first one on, this is the one that has all the little shapes on it, and then we'll finish up with the tag shaped cut apart sheet at the very end before we start assembling our cards. So with the paper in order, we'll dive right in. We'll take that pine and we'll just make sure that the grain here is going to dip easily from top to bottom. So just check on the edge. This way the paper is very stiff and inflexible. This way the paper dips and bends easily, so make sure it lands in the trimmer, dipping in that direction. And the same is going to be true for the second piece. So we're going to trim both this pine and the moss at the same time. If you don't feel comfortable doing it that way, just trim it one piece and then go ahead and rewind if you need to, and then do the second one with the same instructions. Otherwise, follow along in the written step 1. Most of the copy under this little to-do list here is for after the couple of cuts have been made. So let's go ahead and trim at 11 3/4. It's going to take off a tiny little strip. And then all the way down to 8. Now in these 2 pieces get set aside. They need some work yet, so don't worry about those large pieces at this point. And let's take this remaining longer strip, 3 3/4 by 12 right now. We'll cut horizontally at 6, and all 4 of these panels go in pocket B. This is known as a little scrap. I tend to put these in pocket D just in case I decide to use them. And we're moving right along to the sea blue, which is this gorgeous textured piece. You're gonna love this paper so much. And then white. So I'll double check my grain direction. It's the same story here. Both pieces need to be dipping easily top to bottom. And this time we just trim directly at 8 inches. Again, we'll set this aside. We need to do some cutting and some scoring and things with that. And this piece we just simply trim horizontally at 6. Now these pieces also get scored, so go ahead and set those aside on that same pile with those larger pieces. Next, we'll take another piece of the pine plain. Check your grain for dipping top to bottom. And sky, same story, dipping top to bottom. We'll cut at 10 1/4. and 7. Rotate and cut at 10. This large piece will be scored, so I'll set those aside. And the skinny guy, we're going to cut at 6, 4, and 2. We're going to make a bunch of squares. So 6, 4, 2. Okay, now we've got a set, 3 sets of squares. All of those go in pocket C, and then there are 2 little tiny rectangles. Those are scraps. And now we have this longer piece. It's 3 1/4 by 12. Let's cut it 10 1/4 and 8 1/4. So this panel goes in pocket C for those slimline cards we're making this month. And then you've got 2 sets of rectangles. The larger rectangle set goes in pocket B, and then these 2 smaller pieces in D for, didn't use it quite yet. Now let's make some more squares. So we'll cut horizontally this last 1 3/4 by 12 piece. Let's cut at 10 1/4, 8 1/2, and 6 3/4. Again, we've got our 6 little squares here. Those go again in pocket C, and these skinny strips also pocket C. We're going to do all that again with the prints. So I'm going to take it, check my grain, dipping top to bottom. I think that definitely wants to go that way. We'll cut at 10 1/4 and 7. Rotate and cut at 10, and really make sure you stabilize. Set these 2 pieces aside to be scored. Let's make squares out of these strips. All right, we've got 6 and 4 and 2. All right, all of this fun stuff. All the squares go in pocket C with the other squares we've been making, and then you've got 2 more tiny little scraps for pocket D. Let's make our little strip here. We'll start out horizontally at 10 1/4, and then 8 1/4. This goes in pocket C. Our larger pair of rectangles in B, and then we've got these little guys in D, or maybe we'll try to use those. And finally, we have 1 more strip here, cut at 10 1/4, 8 1/2, and 6 3/4. Okay, this strip and all of the squares that we made, all of it goes in pocket C again. Well, that's going into C right now. Okay, now sky. Let's take the next sky piece. Check our grain. This was really pronounced. Very, very easy to recognize. Dipping easily left to right. And same for the sea blue. Dipping left to right this time. This is going to make the base for our slimline cards. And we'll cut at 11 1/4 and 7. Now rotate and cut at 8 1/2. Set aside to be scored. This larger rectangle will trim horizontally at 5 3/4. That's 5 3/4. Pocket B in this large rectangle. And then you do have the smaller rectangle here. These are both going to go into pocket A. And now for this 4 1/4 by 12, we'll cut horizontally at 11 and 5 1/2. Put both of these into pocket A. These end up being the card bases, but they don't get folded. You'll find out soon. It's really fun. I think that's the first thing to go into A for now. And then we do have some scraps here. This long 1 by 12 or 3/4 by 12, and these other little guys. We'll put those in D with the others. We just have 2 more main sheets to trim until we get to the cut aparts. So we'll check for the white dipping. This one needs to dip left to right. Same here. Again, more tall cards, but just a different formula. We'll cut at 9 1/2 and 7. rotate and cut at 8.5. This is another set of card bases. Take the rectangle. We're going to repeat this a little bit too. We trim at 5 3/4. This goes in pocket B. And then these little scrappy guys go into A. They're not scraps, they're going to be used. And then let's take a pair of these 2.5 by 12s. We'll cut horizontally at 6 3/4. That'll go in pocket C. And it does create a rather large scrap, much larger than we're used to. We'll repeat the same thing with the next strip by cutting horizontally at 6 3/4. Pocket C. And once again, a scrap for pocket D. Moving right along to the cut aparts. I think we'll place this into the trimmer so that these strips of squares are on the right edge. That's probably going to be our safest start. And if I follow those clearly printed registration marks, I want to give a nice cut at 10.5. And then slide down to 9. If you're wondering where the written instructions are for this, my guidelines are basically just to trim along those registration marks. If you watch the video, that's when you're going to get all of the details of the trimming. Then we go to 6.5 and line those up as well as you can with the edge of the blade. Now rotate. I'm going to have you trim off these strips first. So make sure the do more things that make you forget to check your phone is on the right. And that's at 10.5. And then 9, 7.5, and 6, and finally 3. Just let those pieces pile up, and then trim that last section horizontally at 4 3/4, and 3. Lastly, 1.5. Okay, now we can do some filing here. All of these pieces that came off the end, that last strip, all of them go in pocket B. And we'll do the same thing with this next set. That was 4 3/4, and then 3 and 1.5, I believe, yes. Oh, 1 1/4. That last one might have been 1 1/4 also. I apologize if I had that measurement wrong. All of these, once again, go in pocket B and pocket C for these long strips. Now we have this evenly split strip. I think it'll be 9, 6, and 3 to separate these. 9, 6, and 3. And all of these go in pocket A. Here we have two very similar strips. I'm a little particular, so I'll probably end up cutting them one at a time. I'll make sure the smallest square is on the right. So that, these are 1.5 inches square, I believe. So 10.5. And then 9. 7.5. 6. 4.5. And 3. If you want, you can let the squares lay and just take the rectangle and put that in pocket A. Repeat again. We'll make these 1.5 inch squares. So 10.5, 9, 7.5, 6, 4.5, and 3. Okay, once again, you can take this rectangle that remains, that goes in pocket A, and then all of the squares go in C. Lots of squares in pocket C for sure. Okay, and this one, there's almost less trimming at this point because there's going to be some fussy cutting later. So let's place this in the trimmer with the tags sort of on the left, and right away we'll cut at about 6.5-ish is what I'm seeing here. Just make sure those registration marks line up. And then slide over to 3 1/4. Rotate, and we're going to cut at 11 to just get that little piece off the end, and 5.5. All right, the two tags we'll place in pocket B, and there's a little rectangle at the end for pocket A. Let's do that again. So I think it was 11 and 5.5. 11, 5.5. The tags go in B, and the little guy goes in A. We're going to do one last thing here by trimming these sentiments off the end. Cut at 11 and 10. All of these will be fussy cut and placed for now in pocket A. And then we'll just trim and separate these last two little pieces here at, those were cut at 3 1/4. Let the adventure begin and fun awaits. Go find it. All 4 of these, pocket A. That's all the trimming. So I'm going to set my trimmer aside and grab my cutting mat. I'm not sure how many times you've used the measuring marks on a cutting mat or if you just kind of use it for cutting with a ruler, but we're going to use a combination of both, the cutting mat, the ruler, and a craft knife to work together to trim this 8 by 12 at an angle. So what we really want to do is trim from 5 1/4 inches at the top down to 3 inches at the bottom. And I could absolutely mark those areas with a pencil, but if I carefully align this just into the corner of my mat, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1/4 inches from that line down to the 3 over here on this lower corner. So 3 inches from this edge, 5 1/4 inches from this edge. And that way, I don't even really need to add pencil marks. I just need to strategically align my ruler with those 2 spots on my cutting mat. Again, this is 5 1/4 inches from this edge and 3 inches from this one. If you want to mark it with a ruler, of course you can do that. But I'm just taking a nice sharp craft knife to separate that. I should also note that this starts at 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm just counting the inches. So again, I'll place the next sheet in here. Make sure it's nice and lined up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 1/4. That's that middle-y size line there. And down to 3 at the bottom. And slice at an angle. But repeat that for the remaining 2 pieces. Once you've made all of the slices on all 4 of those 8 by 12 pieces, you'll notice that there's one that's larger and one that's smaller. Take the larger pieces, and those are going to be used all together in pocket A. The smaller ones just need one more little cut. So I'm going to grab my trimmer again. And let's place these pieces one at a time, or maybe we can just do 2 at a time, into the trimmer, so that the narrowest section is on the far right. That's really important. You don't want to trim the other way, and you want the straight edge of the paper to be at the top of the trimmer base. It seems maybe a little complicated, but it's really not too bad. Just, again, make sure that the narrow side is on the right, the straight edge is at the top. We'll make 3 cuts, 11 1/4, 7 1/2, 3 3/4. Let's just go ahead and repeat that. Again, narrow piece is on the right, straight edge is at the top. We'll cut at 11 1/4, 7 1/2, 3 3/4. Now what we've done is made a series of panels that all have angles. If you just look at them angling down, they're perfect. 1, 2, 3. Look at all those panels, and then you will have just 4 little end cuts. These are 3/4 of an inch by something, by 2 3/4. These can be disposed of. All of these trimmed panels now can be placed in pocket A for those cool angled trifold cards. I'll set aside my trimmer and cutting mat. Next, I'll just take those larger angled pieces. I'm going to score them horizontally at 4 and 8. And repeat that for all of these angled pieces. Always make sure that the piece is placed in the score pal with the straight edge right at the top before you score at 4 and 8. And all of these can be placed back in pocket A. And now I'll just tackle the remaining pieces that I have for scoring. You're going to find some 7 by 8.5. This can be tricky. This is going to become the slimline card, but you want to make sure that you're scoring in the right direction because this card is only 1/2 inch off of being square. So make sure it's 7 up here, 8.5 down there, and score at 3.5. I'm doing 2 cards at the same time. I still have some nice score lines here, and I'll repeat for the other pair. So again, 7 is here, score at 3.5. Then we have some 7x10s. We'll score these horizontally at 5, so just make sure it reads 10 there. And then again for the last 2, so 5. So if we want to get these filed, these larger ones go in pocket B for the pocket cards, and then the other slimline ones we scored earlier, those can be placed in pocket C. All that's left are these little 4x6s that are going to grow up to become pockets. So we'll place, well, just 2 at a time into the score pal. I'm going to score vertically at 1, and then rotate and score horizontally at 1 and 5. Repeat for the other pair, or if you're working 1 at a time, that's fine too. Just 1, rotate, 1, and 5. And that makes just a U-shaped arrangement of scores, and these are going to be used in card set B. The next thing we typically do is just work on 1 set of cards at a time. We'll make a sample of each, and once you've learned how to make 1, you'll know how to make all 4 of each card style quite readily. I have my instructions open to page 4 where I can see an image of all the 4 of these angled trifold cards, and I have everything taken out of pocket A. So if you haven't done that already, now would be a good time to do it. I also did a little bit of sorting, just a little bit, to try to get things, you know, visually available so I can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to deal out what I had in that pocket onto 4 different piles. So I'm going to start out by dealing these larger panels. They're just 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I have 2 blue panels and 2 sea blue panels. Those are going to be the bases of the card. Then we have these big giant angled fold pieces. So it looks like the first one uses the moss, and then we're going to use some sea blue followed by the white, and then the pine green on that last card. This is kind of a funny way to set it up, but these are some big pieces of paper. Then there are actually almost 4 of every image on this. We're using all of the images, 1 image on each card. But this is really the cool part, is the these angled folds. And just to figure out the formula for the way this whole card comes together really racked my brain, but I was able to do it, and I'm really proud of this particular formula. Each one of these panels will fit perfectly onto the card, starting with the sea blue in the large panel here, and then we've got the pine, and then moss and white. For this next one, I'm going to use the pine green. This is the medium sized, then white, then sea blue, and moss. For the final panels, we'll use white, moss, pine, and sea blue. So I'm continually just distributing the colors to the appropriate card. Next, we have all these sentiments and other little things involved, so let's go ahead and do that. There should be like a skinny little strip in sea blue, a skinny one in white, another one in light blue, and another one in moss. So these are just like little 1-bys. They're really pretty small. And those should correspond with the sentiments that we plan for the front outside of the card. So pack lighter, go farther, goes on the first 2. And then let the adventure begin, goes on the second 2. Okay, getting down there. Now we've got Fun Awaits, Go Find It, along with Have an Unforgettable Day. That happens with both of those. Fun Awaits, Go Find It, Have an Unforgettable Day. And on these 2 lower cards, there's No Time to Be Bored and Thinking of You on both of those. Whew, that's a lot of really cool pieces. You are going to love how this comes together. So let's go ahead and take our first set. I'll set the remaining 3 cards aside and see how all of this happens. It's just amazing how this comes together. So what you'll do is take the highest peak and put that on the right, and then you'll fold over on this score line. I know it's not the right direction, but you didn't really want to have to worry about that too. And then fold back on the lowest peak. And that should all line up to make this really nice looking Z. Got that? And if you want, you can adhere this directly onto just the single base. It's not a folded card base. It's just a single base because this is got a lot going on right here in the front. Now we have a little bit of work we can do to prep here. We'll add the Pack Lighter Go Farther to its little mate here. And then that's going to end up being nested onto this white panel. Now just make sure the white panel is angled correctly. Notice how it goes upward and it matches with this card panel as well. So I'm just going to add that right there, center it at the bottom. And then next I'll take some of this really beautiful metallic sky blue ribbon. I'll cut a little piece of that. Grab my tape. So sometimes it's really the order of assembly that just gets affected. So I'll add this tape here and just wrap the ends around to the back and tape them in place. And now this panel is ready to be placed. But before we do that, so I told you it's all about order of assembly. You can add some washi tape to that angled edge of the card. And then what I did was angled my cut of the tape toward the top so that when I fold this back, it's not visible. There we go. And then now I can nest this, and if you want to do this, you can. Just nest this onto the green panel. It's not going to be flawlessly, marginally perfect, but center it as best as you can. Yay! Okay, that's the first panel. Now there's another panel that's going to go this way. So before I attach it, I'll take my washi tape and just add it to the top edge and making sure the panel is facing the right direction. And this will just go fine this way. This is going to need a little snip so it doesn't show through when we wrap it around to the back. There we go. And then I can add this panel. And this is, so if the card opens this way on the first trifold, then I'll center this on the next one. Then open it again, double check my fit, and it will nest perfectly that way. So I will once again add the tree washi tape to the top edge of this. And wrap around to the back. And add to the base. Next, we have to figure out how we're going to situate all of the elements on the inside of the card. And I think it would be a good idea if I had some of that stuff done. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and fussy cut one of each of these images from the sheet. Just as a note, as you're cutting these, it doesn't have to be perfect. A great way to deal with any imperfections in your cutting would be to just sponge a little, or brush, a little bit of our earth ink onto the edge of the images. And that will really just make it look nice and professional. It doesn't have to be extremely time consuming at all. I finished these images in just a few minutes. So as I mentioned, if you happen to have some earth ink, I just used our brush applicator, and this can be very quickly done. You can see how rough cut I did on the tree, but it looks kind of cool once you add the ink. I'll ink the feather. That looks really nice. And finally, this little hair. I call him Bun Bun. We used to have a little bunny pet, and we loved him. He was a really cool guy. Okay, so with these prepped images, now let's see how we can add them to the card in a really fun way. I'm going to start from the back and work my way forward. So if we have an unforgettable day, this is the main inner sentiment. We can add that right to the lower corner of the card, and then take the tree. Now I think what's cool about the effect of this angle is having items extending past the edge of the angled fold. So I'm going to take some bookbinding glue, just because it's a dimensional item, and I'm going to make sure that it peeks past the tip of the angle, and then it can sit right on top of this area of the sentiment. Very cool. Then I'll kind of close the card and open it to this second panel where I can add this little bunny guy. Oh, I should make sure I don't put any adhesive on the backs of his ears, because that's the spot where I plan to have him really peeking up past. So just make sure you don't do what I did. Just avoid having glue on the back of the ears that will extend past the angled fold. Then on the front, well, we still have more to add here. Fun awaits, go find it. Now in my visual sample, you might notice that there is actually a little green mat on this. And in order to mat that, oh, look at that, it's the exact right size. So I can trim this to fit perfectly, and that won't be a problem either. This piece just needed to be 1 1/4. So I can then add this. And don't forget we have a feather. I just love how this came together. It's so sweet, so interactive. Maybe I'll put the top of the feather here, kind of overlapping a little. Nice. And then my little wolf, he can tuck so that he's sort of in the middle between the tree and the bunny. His feet are hidden a little bit by the ribbon. And last but not least, and this is why I did this last, when you're attaching metal things with our bookbinding glue, you just want to be able to apply the glue to the item and then walk away for a while. And when you come back, everything will be nice and dry. So I'm just adding a pretty generous portion of bookbinding glue to the back of this really cool silver branch. And I'm going to tuck the bottom of the branch kind of down beneath the ribbon and have it like angling to the right here. And you might find it ideal to just place something kind of heavy onto that silver branch until it bonds well with the card itself, and then it will stay there forever, no problem. And that is how all of the sets of cards are assembled in this group A with those angles. Isn't that fun? I just think this turned out really, really neat. I'm very pleased with this. So I'm going to set this aside under something with a little weight on it till it dries, and we'll move on to set B together. I've got everything out of that B pocket, and now let's distribute all of the pieces for the cards. Again, I went ahead and just sort of did a cursory sort just to make sure things were kind of sorted by size so we can figure everything out. And we'll begin just with our leaf, our feather card bases, and then we have a sky card base and a pine card base. So that's the foundation. Next, we'll need one of those scored pieces that grow up to become the pocket. So here's our 2 sky pockets for the busier prints, and then 2 plain white pockets for the sky and the sky and the pine. Now, each of these tags that will live in the pocket are double matted. So I have a pine and then moss, and the second layer. Let's see, we're going to vary it up a little bit. We're going to do moss, do a white, do a sea blue, and then the sky. And we mixed up our tags a little bit. We've got this wishing you another year full of amazing adventures. And then we're going to do that on both of these. And then this is a wonderful day. I've never seen this one before. Love that. Wow, we've got so many fun panels for everything. I love it. So a panel for this is going to be sky, then pine, then feathers, and I believe that's going to be feathers. Yes, feathers for both. Last, we just have some decorative panels. So for this first card, we'll use feathers, then an eagle, and feathers again, and an eagle. Finally, the inside sentiments for every card. Here, we're going to use happy birthday, and then let the adventure begin for each of these. And there we have all of the pieces distributed. Once again, all the cards are assembled in the same fashion. So we'll just do one together so you can get the idea of how it comes together. We'll just begin by doing the easiest thing, and that's just folding the 7x10 card base in half to make our 5x7. And I think now would be a good time to prep the pocket. If you happen to have an envelope punch board, you could certainly take this 6-inch side of the pocket, make sure it's the side that doesn't have a score line, put it in the punch board at 3. That's going to center the punch, so you can have a little thumb hole for your pocket. Clever, right? Next, we'll take our scissors and go ahead and cut it's mitering the corners, so at like a wide square shape. We're going to go toward the intersecting score lines on this lower right corner to remove sort of a wide square. And we'll do the same thing on the other side, just going to the intersecting score line with the point of the scissors, and then doing that from the side to remove the other square. That's what's going to give us the flaps needed to create a pocket. Now, it's really important when you're making a pocket that you want to be able to slide something in and out of, that the side flaps get folded in first. If that doesn't happen and you bring the bottom flap up first instead, every single time you try to slide something into the pocket, if it's done in the other way, that item will catch, or is likely to catch, on that bottom lip. So just sides in first, then bottom up. And I think I'm going to go ahead and just apply glue to these side flaps, or apply adhesive rather, and then fold up the long bottom flap. Just make sure you have it all around the perimeter. I would also recommend doing this with our bookbinding glue. If you like to be particular, you could certainly get out your little mini grid ruler and just kind of get your dimensions from the bottom. It's going to be 2.5 inches will center you, and then another 1/2 inch from each edge. So at 2, if I place the pocket there, I know that my reveal on the bottom, the left and the right, if you just allow a 1/2 inch margin, will be perfect for the positioning of everything. Then on the front of this, we've got these really cool feathers. So I'm going to nest the feather cut apart onto the sky colored panel. And the kit includes this really fun jute. And we selected it because we knew we were going to be adding the compass charms. And those compass charms do have 2 hanging loops on them, which I think make them super cool. And here's an easy way to get those attached. I experimented with different ways of attaching, and you'll see that when you look at the card samples. Some I just attached at an angle, but I think this is kind of the easiest way to do it. So you just trim some jute and fold the piece over, and then thread the loop of the fold through the hole. Once you get it just sort of past where you can open the loop, thread the tails through the loop. That, to me, was the easiest of all the different ways I've tried, and believe me, I've tried all the ways. Okay, so here, this is going to go in the loop end, pull until you can open the loop a little, and then bring the other ends through. I probably used more jute than I needed to, but I didn't want to have to struggle with it on camera. Okay, then you can grab a piece of tape, and if you want the jute to be a little more visible, you can sort of spread it out. So what I would do is just sort of take your thumb and hold the charm where you want it to be while you wrap those ends around at the back. Tape one side. Once that's done, the hardest part's over. And then just split the loops, the ends rather, of the jute going to the other side. Wrap it around and tape. At that point, if you have excess, you can trim it. So definitely I used a little more than I needed. But now I've got this really cool looking embellishment on my card. Okay, at this point I can now nest it onto the pocket, and it should center within the area of the pocket when you include the dip from the punch. It's going to be a little bit narrower. That's by design. We can maybe just get rid of this right away. Let's take that happy birthday, and we'll just pop that into the inside of the card so we don't forget to do that at the end, which is my tendency. I don't know about you, but I always forget the innie. And for this next trick, I'm going to grab my cutting mat and remind you of a little technique that I use when we have a tag shaped like this, especially when it's matted. This was awesome. I'm not sure if you were around last month, but we did give you in your card kit one of these awesome mini grid rulers. So I'm going to align the first dashed line of my grid with the printed line on the tag, and then just slice away the triangular shape, leaving a 1/8 inch, a 1/8 inch perimeter on this tag, and it matches the perimeter on the other sides. So this can then be attached to the next size larger mat that we trimmed earlier. If I take the ruler and once again find the first dashed line and line it up with the edge of the tag now, I can get rid of that. And guess what? I'm going to do the same thing one more time. So easy, and it looks so professionally done. Do you agree? I hope you agree. Maybe you think, that's just way more trouble than it's worth. Trisha, just take a scissors and snip it off. By all means, have at it. I just wanted to always show you a way to up your game. So the craft knife game isn't for everyone, and I understand. It's totally okay. You could also draw with a pencil and just use scissors, but at least when you do it this way, you have that consistency on all the sides, and it looks so nice. Then you can use that same ruler to find the center of your tag. And if you want, you can just take a pencil and just mark right where that center is, or you can eyeball it, of course. You come through maybe with a Crop-A-Dile and just center up your hole. Now you've got a nice punched hole exactly where it belongs in the tag. Now you can top your tag one of two ways. You can use some of the sky colored ribbon. Maybe I'll do that on this one just to show you how simple. And just to save on ribbon length in this case, all I did was just threaded it through and tied another knot, just a double knot to hold it. Make sure you leave enough ribbon to have a nice finished edge, but you don't want to waste it, of course, but that looks really good. On one of these I used jute, but on all of them I did use one of these adorable little tags. So basically I took the jute ribbon, went through the feather craft tag, and then tie a bow. Now, when you tie a bow this small, it doesn't matter how small your bow ends up. Your bow can start out as big as you really want. All you need to do to make a tiny bow is always just pull the tails until the bow loops are the size you want them to be, and then pull them tight and trim the ends. So what you can do there is either pop dot or just adhere. Maybe I'll use some of this two-way tape. Probably bookbinding glue or a pop dot would be nice for this as well. And just add your little feather underneath the jute crossing the way there. The tag fits perfectly into the card, and that is done. So I'm going to show you the rest of the cards in this set. Here's the one we sort of started with, and I have the compass charm attached with the jute, but I also just attached the tag directly to the top with excess jute. So you can just tell however you want to attach this. Also on the inside, do you see that I have some pine colored paper? That came from Pocket D. So I thought, well, it'd be nice if this had a little contrast. I found a sheet that would fit, and then I trimmed it and added it to the inside of the card. It's something you can always do to use the scraps that you have to minimize them even further. Here the tag is topped with the metallic fiber, and then I just wrapped the corner with this. I made loops, just wrapped it right on through and added the feather tag, the same on this one. And here I did the crisscross. So I got the hang of it, of attaching these toward the end of the set of 4, so you can benefit from my experience there. All right, let's move on to the final set of cards. Now I can say that the best way to get started with set C is to simply make sure everything is sorted by size. So I have my card bases, some panels, some smaller panels. I have these innie panels and their nesting mates. I've got a series of pine and sky and feather squares, and then I have a series of smaller squares in pine and sky and green, and then I have all these really small squares with little artwork on them. And the best way to start out is to have that all sorted in its appropriate order. And then let's go ahead and deal this out. So the base of the first card will be sea blue, and then we have a sky base, followed by a white, and then a moss. Then our next largest panels, we're going to go with the feather and a pine, a sky blue, and feather. Now you can change this up to any panel interchanges you want. Then we have moss, white, another moss, and then another white. Now on the inside, we have vertical and horizontals. So these end up being horizontal and these will end up being vertical. And each one of these gets something on the inside that can be designer's choice, whatever you want to highlight your any style. Next, we're going to distribute 3 larger squares to each one. So we're going to start with by putting the blue large squares here. And then we have some feather, 3 of those with this one. 3 feather squares here and 3 pine here. Now we have the smaller still squares. We'll do 3 feathers here on this really feathery card. And then 3 sky with this second one. 3 dark green with the third set, and then back to feathers with set number 4. Now we can distribute, it looks like I used the trees and the feathers and the elk. Let's see, tree, doesn't matter. Feather, elk. All right, then on the other ones I've got a moose, an eagle, and a bear. A moose, eagle, and a bear. There. Now everything's been distributed, so we'll once again just make one of these cards together that they all will fall into place exactly the same way this one does. Okay, so if this is review to you, the bump of the score will go on the inside of the fold. So I'm going ahead to fold this and just burnish that to make my card base. Now we are not going to assemble anything else to do with our card base right out of the gates because we have some ribbon that needs to go around this large panel before it's nested. So that often does affect the order of things. I'm going to be using my grid ruler to help me center this panel onto the card. And so if you find your 0 center, the measurement from end to end is going to be 4 1/8. And we need to be 3/8 of an inch from the edge. So I'm 3 cubes in. So once I kind of have that figured out, I will apply adhesive to this and add this to the card. Again, just making sure you're centered. 3 3/8 looks about right. What's different about this style card is that the distance from here to here is different from the distance from here to here. That's okay, because this is designed to actually better fit these large squares that will go on next. I hope this is making sense to you. For the squares, those are going to be 1/2 of an inch from the edge of this moss colored panel. And if you start up by putting the first square on, it's going to be 1 inch on either side. If this style of centering is new to you, just hang in there with me. Eventually you will get it. It will start to make sense. And then we're going to separate them by just 1/8 of an inch. If you use the ruler like this, you will not be adhering panels in a downhill or uphill fashion, as I am prone to do. If you just want to eyeball this, that's fine as well. But if you do it this way, so this one is perfectly centered, 1/8 of an inch apart between the two, you'll have a perfect 1/4 inch border all the way around. And that makes for just a really nice looking card, if you ask me. Now I've got this beautiful pine green taffeta ribbon, and I'm just checking the grain of the ribbon to make sure it's wrapping in the direction it wants to wrap. And I'll trim it slightly longer than this longest panel. Grab 2 pieces of tape. Really try to get it centered nicely over all of the squares and bring them around to the back. Tape the ends. Flip everything over. Now we have more squares. These are feathery. And if you want to save a little time, you can actually add the adhesive to the back of 3 squares at a time. This is how I would do it. And it doesn't really matter any old way they want to go. If you want to use your ruler, you could, but I think at this point it's pretty easy to center the squares into place. Nice. Okay, finally we'll finish with our eagle, our moose, and our bear. So I'll add adhesive, and if you would like to pop dot these, you certainly can. I believe I did on my cards, but in the interest of time, I'll forego that right now. So you have the eagle, a moose, and a bear. In fact, I think I had this running on top. I think I added the next set of set of squares, the feathers, and then added the ribbon, and then pop dotted the elements. Obviously, order of assembly is the thing, so if you just need to punt, it's not a big deal. I'll just bring my ruler in one last time so I can get my 1/4 inch reveal perfect. It's such a long panel. On these slimline cards, it's easy to attach things that are crooked, so I like to have the ruler there to help me. Very nice. Now to finish things up, I'm going to do 2 things for the inside. First, I'll nest and center this piece onto the panel just to create some contrast. Open the card, and then find your washi tape so you can run that along the bottom edge there. The only thing you have to remember is that since it's the edge of the outside of the card, you need to trim from the panel with scissors, and that's not a difficult thing to do at all. There we go. So I'll take my Nested Sentiment. This is such a nice card. I love this. And I'll add it right here, and then the idea would be to right above that. And now I have 1 finished card from set C, and the remaining 3 will be put together the same exact way. I'll show you my finished card samples. So here's the one we made together, and yes, I waited until after attaching the second square, then the ribbon, then pop dot those elements. I think that looks just striking. This is the taffeta in both of those cases, and on these other ones I did the taffeta and sky. I had enough ribbon to double up the ribbon on these other remaining cards, and this one was just a sky. So I just did a combination, and at the end realized I had enough ribbon to do a double. So that's the way I did it, and I'm very pleased with how that turned out. And I think I like the idea of waiting to add the ribbon until that last square has been attached. So don't be like me today, be like me the other day. All right, well, this was a lot of fun. I hope you do love these cards, and I know that you can take all of the papers that we trimmed in the instructions and create another set of cards to coincide with these formulas, because that's precisely what I did. This formula was used last in Happy Camper, and I reran the formula with new papers, new artwork, and the cards are equally as fabulous. I hope you agree. They're so much fun, and I think you're going to enjoy using this formula again and again. If you like this Pacific Northwest style, please join me over at the Page Kit tutorial. I have all kinds of fun tips and techniques to share with you, and we'll make 8 beautiful pages together. I'll see you there.